I started working as a garbage man because of the lucrative pay. I wanted to be able to provide for myself and a future mate. It helped that I didn't find it hard to wake up at 3 in the morning. I got my own two-bedroom apartment by the age of 21. I started going out on the town in an attempt to meet a woman. I found one that stood out to me. I saw her sitting all by herself in a bubble tea shop, reading a colorful paperback. I introduced myself, and she let me sit down with her. She was soft-spoken and seemed generally sad. She would perk up about certain things in conversation, but overall she seemed to have a past that made her cautious and hesitant to make friends. We met several more times, and I found out she didn't even speak with her family anymore. Not her parents, brother, or any of her old friends. Without anyone, she just survived on her own, painting in her little studio apartment. She sold her art as part of her income, but she also worked part-time at an art cafe, where she hosted and taught wine and paint nights. She was sweet, but didn't want to say anything more about her past, like why nobody talked to her anymore. After dating for a year and a half, she moved in with me. I felt responsible for her and cared deeply. I wanted her to know she could come to me for anything. About 3 months of living together were really wonderful. Then her childhood friend got in touch with her again. I thought it was great, and I supported her. She was really excited, but nervous to talk to him again. I thought it was because she was afraid of getting close, only to be hurt again, but that's not exactly what was going on. It turned out he didn't speak to anyone from his past, either. He was working a construction job 4 hours away from us and started video calling and texting my girlfriend all the time. I tried to remain supportive, but he was taking up a lot of her time, and it seemed way more than necessary, even if they hadn't spoken for a while. When I started thinking this way, I felt like I sounded paranoid for accusing them of falling for each other. I decided my girlfriend just wouldn't do that, especially not when I was there for her and being exactly who she needed in life. Right after I decided to relax about it, she asked me if her friend could come stay in the spare room for 4 days, the duration of a local construction project. I didn't want to open the door to distrust in the relationship, so I said he could. I wanted her to see me as the man she could spend her life with, and if I didn't let her friends come over, she wouldn't feel like this was her home. I feel stupid now for being so considerate about how she felt and our future because she didn't consider me or our future at all. I said yes, but I also called off work, so I wouldn't have to leave them alone. I slept lightly for the first 2 nights, but it seemed like my girlfriend stayed in bed all night. She woke up with me at the same time the first 2 mornings, but on the third, she was gone when I woke up. I ran through the house in a panic, only to find her in the kitchen with AP, making breakfast for us all. I sat alone, uncomfortably watching them from the table. AP gobbled down the eggs while standing up and left for the site. I breathed a sigh of relief, having my girlfriend to myself again, but she only sat with me quietly to eat her eggs, then retreated to the shower. After her shower, she left to bring AP a lunch she packed for him. This pissed me off. I bit my tongue until she was out the door, but then I freaked out. She never packed me lunch, even though I mentioned how hungry I was whenever I got home. When she got back, I told her we needed to talk. I said I didn't appreciate how affectionate she was being with someone that was only meant to be a friend, that her actions seemed like that of a girlfriend, and they talked way too much. She absolutely freaked out. I couldn't have seen it coming. She was always so meek and mild-mannered, but it changed in an instant, as soon as I accused her of being romantic with AP. Now I knew it was, because I guessed exactly what was happening, and she didn't like that I could see through her acting. She accused me of being crazy and paranoid, for thinking she'd be so disrespectful to me. She said I was wrong, and needed to have more trust in her after being together for nearly 2 years. I started to second-guess how I was feeling, and left the house. I didn't know what to think anymore, but I knew I didn't like how she talked to her friend. I decided to search for her mom on Facebook. I found her and sent her a message. I explained the situation and said, long story short, I needed to know if something happened between these friends in the past. She called me and told me that she and my wife's father stopped talking to their daughter completely when she and her friend refused to stop sleeping with each other. It was years ago now, but they were very inconsiderate of anyone else and would cheat on other people instead of just being together. I was speechless and mortified. I drove back home in a hurry and found them locked in the spare room. I banged on the door and yelled for them both to get out. I said I got off the phone with her mom and knew all about their off and on, hidden relationship. My girlfriend then said she doesn't need to explain herself to me, then started packing her stuff. As they loaded his old truck, I called her a bunch of names for wasting my time and making me think she loved me. She was crying, but I don't know why. She was only getting what she wanted, right? 1 month later, I got home from work and found her sitting on my doorstep. She was crying really hard. Her face was red. I'm not an evil person, but I was glad to see she wasn't happy. She said AP met a new single woman with a nice home and decided that sleeping with each other, no matter who they were with, was wrong. In order to get back to my house, she had to take an Uber. I told her to go get her old apartment back because I never wanted to see her and I would certainly never trust her. I slammed the door in her face. I have no idea where she went or what she did with her life. Whenever I passed the bubble tea shop, I never saw her. She ruined the good thing we had because she couldn't leave her repeating mistake in the past. Opie, I am so sorry your girlfriend had this terrible, taboo relationship with her friend. If she learned anything from her past, it should have been to leave him alone, so she could move on. She had a chance at a happy life with you and convinced you to trust her. She might have believed the mistake was in the past, but she didn't realize it was still up to her to let him back in her life. I am glad you came out of this situation, having learned a lesson. You weren't persuaded to forgive her, and you followed through with your hunches. Contacting her mom was the perfect way to know that, without a doubt, this girl was no good. You just happened to come home and find them locked in the room, but you already knew something was up since they talked way too much. I wish you the best of luck in life, and thank you for sharing your story. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I were married for 13 years, and during that time, I supported her as she started attending school to become a veterinarian. Before she graduated, she started working for an experienced vet with his own practice. We were very much in love, and she thanked me often for supporting her during this time, so she'd be able to follow her dream of becoming a vet and owning her own practice, meaning that hopefully she could take over the one she was working at now when the man she works for retires. He mentioned that he was looking for someone to fill his role, and my wife believed he was referring to her. He was, but I don't think she anticipated what he was going to ask of her in return. I certainly didn't anticipate her betrayal. She came home late one day, feeling quite happy and energetic. I expected her to be exhausted, because that's how she usually felt after an extra long day. Her coming home late usually meant she had to deal with unexpected animals being brought in. Sometimes she witnessed death, and on those days, she usually went to bed without eating. I felt bad, but she did choose the career, so it was something she'd have to cope with. Anyway, on this night, she was not sad or exhausted, quite the opposite. I asked what happened today, and the smile fell from her face immediately. She looked shocked that I was asking such a normal question. She said nothing unusual and asked why I asked. I laughed nervously and said I usually asked her that when she got home, but she was also very happy a second ago, so that's why I was asking. Her face softened, but she didn't know what to say. She finally came up with a fake reason for her bouncy attitude, saying it was the receptionist's birthday. So they played music. ate cake, and acted silly. It was refreshing after a long day. This totally made sense to me, and take me for a fool, I believed her. Everything returned to normal for a few days, except she was happier than normal. Who knew the receptionist's birthday would have such a lasting effect on her? She came home on Friday night, late, and said life always has a way of working out for the better. She's so thankful to be pursuing her dream and working in this career. I was hesitant to say I loved doing it for her, because I just felt like something was wrong. I decided to bring her flowers and a restaurant lunch to work the next day, and that's the day everything changed. The receptionist's name is Blair. When I walked in holding flowers and food, she said she hoped I was the Prince Charming she'd been waiting for. She was flirty and pretty, but I told her I was a married man looking for my wife. When I said her name, she looked me in the eye with a very upset expression. She didn't know what to say or do. She just stared at me. I asked if she was okay, and if she could go get her for me. She finally stood up, looked into the hallway, and whispered for me to come with her outside. I was extremely confused, but I went along with it. We stood by her car, and she told me something I just couldn't believe. She said the other night she was slower to leave than usual and already said goodbye to Mr. Vet and my wife. They were the last two in the building, besides her. As she put on her coat, she was looking at the security cameras and saw them doing things in a back room with the door shut, probably not realizing that she was still in the building. My vision started spinning when she told me this, but I snapped myself out of it because my wife was good. She was always so kind and honest and grateful. That's what I was thinking. I asked Blair when her birthday was, and she said October 20th. It was July, so I knew my wife lied about that, but I still couldn't believe she was cheating on me. I told Blair that I needed her help. In exchange for the roses and lunch, I just needed her to stay a little late again, each night until she caught them again, so she could record the screen with her phone and send it to me. I wrote my number on the little card that came with the roses. Maybe I was flirting a little, but that's for fate to decide, she agreed. While she worked, she was uncomfortable knowing now that my wife was married and doing what she was doing. When she first caught them, she assumed the woman was single and wrote it off as none of her concern. She had to fake being nice to avoid suspicion. She didn't have to wait long for them to do it again. She recorded it and sent it to me. It was hard for me to watch. It was my wife's face, and they were doing it. That's all I needed to see. I posted it on the internet, naming her the vet and the business name, effectively informing everyone in the town and anyone they knew. My wife was the quickest to react, but she got home and greeted me before knowing what I'd done. I asked her if she looked at her phone lately, and that's all it took. She hadn't checked it since she cheated on me just hours before. She gasped, covered her mouth, and I could tell her heart started pounding. She was shaking, and her breathing was uneven. She threw her phone at me in her frustration. She dropped to the floor, and the first thing she said was that AP was going to lose his business. I said, "Well, that's too bad." And my wife charged at me like she became a monster. She blamed me for it, but I said she was crazy. I told her to get out, and she was so hurt by me, for some reason, that she only grabbed a few things and left. She tried telling her family any number of stories in ways that portrayed her as the victim. They didn't believe anything she said. They saw the video and lost all faith in her. They told her she basically risked her career and marriage for nothing. She didn't have to do it, but she did, and this is what happens to people when they don't act with respect. I know all this because it was in the comments of my post. AP lost a bunch of his patients' owners. No one trusted him to behave responsibly, and husbands didn't want their wives or daughters bringing their pets there. His business took a huge hit. Without being able to pay employees, he closed his business. My wife begged me to forgive her after she accepted that her whole family hated her for sleeping with AP. When we first got married, her family was super proud of her for catching me. I refused to allow her to come back into my life because after all those years of supporting her and committing myself to her, she betrayed me for someone else. I would have been a fool to help her. She ended up moving back in with her family. She wasn't working at the time because of AP closing his practice, so she had to quickly find a job. She was absolutely miserable because AP wanted nothing to do with her. He considered her bad luck and felt sick to his stomach whenever he looked at her. He let himself mix pleasure with business, and it destroyed both. She actually told him she was married, but he swore I'd never find out. Once he retired, he promised she could have the business and he'd leave her alone, but I doubt that was going to happen. My wife told me all this in the hopes it would encourage me to forgive her. It didn't help, but it was nice to know the reasoning behind it. I haven't heard from her in a long time now and have been thinking about asking out Blair. She got a new job pretty fast and has remained on my side and loyal since all of this started. She gives me hope, and overall I've learned that it's possible to let go of someone you once loved and trusted because unfair and unpredictable things happen in life. There are other trustworthy people out there. Opie, you've been through a shocking life event. I am so sorry your wife made a choice that rendered the 13+ years you spent with her a waste of time. At least you learned some things, but it's extremely disappointing that she didn't honor her vows and respect you any more than that. I appreciate your attitude about it now, although it must have been very difficult to remain so resilient. I'm glad you had Blair on your side for the entirety of the event and afterward. You were both very clever to get the evidence needed to support the claims against the business. And after AP's irresponsibility and disrespect towards another man for sleeping with his wife, he didn't deserve to remain in business. Everything that needed to happen did. I'm so glad you didn't try to forgive her or keep her in your life. It takes strength to resist caring about someone after spending so many years with them, but it was her own choice that led her to this point, and there's no reason you should have to sacrifice or become less of a man. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.
The cake was delicious, the champagne was bubbly, and right now, my wedding ring is the most uncomfortable thing in the world. I shifted uncomfortably, catching Rob's eye from across the breakfast bar. He smiles, that slow, sweet smile that used to melt my heart. Now, it just makes me feel guilty. You okay? He asks. Yeah, fine. I forced the word out. Just wedding stuff. A pathetic excuse, even to my own ears. The problem isn't the wedding. I mean, it should be the solution. 10 years with Rob, great years, and now we're finally making it official. But ever since that, it's like something shifted. Everything's the same, but it's not. He eats his cereal the same, kisses me the same before work, but it feels flat.
Stale.
Even his snoring, which used to be kinda cute, now makes me want to scream into a pillow. Work should be a distraction, but it's the opposite. Andrew's been there for years, just friendly banter and shared lunches. But since the wedding, I don't know. When he looks at me now, it's different. A lingering warmth behind his eyes that wasn't there before. Makes my cheeks burn a little too bright. God, I need to pull it together. Those after-work drinks with him yesterday? Way too many laughs, fingers brushing, accidentally, way too often. I shouldn't have let him walk me to the bus stop, shouldn't have let my hand linger when he shook mine goodbye, and I most definitely shouldn't have thought about that touch on my commute back to Rob. To my husband. Hey, everything all right? Rob again. He's watching me like he knows I'm mentally a million miles away. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm at work, imagining Andrew's grin and how it makes my stomach do weird flip-floppy things. Things it hasn't done for Rob in years. Long day at work, I lie smoothly, and it hits me. I'm good at this lying. To my husband, I stare at my wedding ring, the gold glinting back like an accusation. It's barely been a month, and I'm already fantasizing about another man? What the hell is wrong with me? My finger hovers over the button. Should I? I shouldn't. Okay, fine. There's no way I'm not. My thumb hits the screen, and the little text message flies across the office to Andrew. Can't stop thinking about last night. The reply comes almost instantly. Me neither. A smirk twitches my lips as a rush of naughty excitement surges through me. It's wrong. So wrong. But it feels impossibly good. The rest of the day is agony. My mind replaying Andrew's hands on me, the whispered promises that lit a wildfire in my belly. Every text buzz is pure adrenaline, pushing those guilty thoughts to the back of my mind. We make plans, not for a drink, but for tomorrow night. A hotel? The words shouldn't feel so thrilling, yet they do. Meetings running late. I tell Rob that night, voice cool and steady. He barely glances up from the TV. Another sharp pang. Just a few months ago, he'd have questioned me, playfully teased me about it. Now, it's just normal. And that stings more than any suspicion could. Each step of my deception is nauseatingly easy. Booking the hotel room under a fake name, inventing an elaborate story about a conference for Rob. It's like someone else is doing this, someone bold and reckless, someone who isn't wearing a wedding band. The hotel room is all plush carpet and heavy curtains, designed for secrets. The second the door clicks shut behind us, any lingering pretense vanishes. Andrew's hands feel electric on my skin, and for a moment, the guilt fades. It's all-consuming, the heat, the hunger, the intoxicating feeling that I'm flinging myself off a cliff with no parachute. Then, my phone buzzes on the nightstand. Rob, a simple text with a heart emoji. Just like that, reality comes crashing down. My stomach churns, and I shove the phone under like I can bury the shame just as easily. Andrew pulls me close, but I feel a million miles away. What was a fantasy is now a chilling reality. I'm not just the girl flirting at work, I'm the cheating wife. What the hell have I become? The smell of coffee makes me want to gag. I make a half-hearted attempt to smile at Rob, but he's already scrolling through his phone. I force down a piece of toast, my insides churning the whole time. How am I going to survive this? How can I possibly look him in the eye when all I see when I do is Andrew, the hotel room, and the monstrous lie I've become? It should be easier. I should just shut this whole thing down with Andrew, block him, tell him it was a mistake, a moment of madness. But the second I see him at work, all resolve washes away. We steal glances like kids passing secret notes in class. One whispered, "You look beautiful," in the hallway later, and that fire reignites. God, I'm pathetic. I'm living a double life now. Half of me is the wife, robotically going through the motions. The other half craves the stolen texts, the quick rendezvous in empty meeting rooms, the burning heat of Andrew's eyes on my body. And the scariest part? It's thrilling. But the thrill comes with a heavy, dread-filled chaser. I jump every time my phone buzzes, terrified Rob's somehow seen a text. I imagine every sideways look from a coworker means they know. Each time Rob kisses my cheek goodbye, I flinch. "Sure, you must smell Andrew on my clothes." "You seem distracted," Rob says one night, interrupting my frantic search for a stray hair clinging to his collar. He's right. I am. I'm distracted by my guilt, by the fear that's eating away at me. Just tired, I mumble, avoiding his eyes. It's a half-truth, at least. Sleep is a nightmare. I either wake up gasping after Rob discovers everything, or worse, I'm back with Andrew, my heart pounding with a lust that makes me feel sick. The lies are never-ending now, each one a fresh knot in the tangled web I've woven. Work events, family emergencies. I spew excuses at Rob, and he eats them up. Because he trusts me, and I'm trashing that trust every single day. The thought is a cold stone sinking in my stomach, making it impossible to enjoy anything, especially the stolen moments of pleasure that should be sweet, but now just taste like ash. I can't shake the feeling I'm being watched. Not by Andrew, by Rob. After dinner, that familiar question again. "You sure everything's okay?" He's trying so hard to reach me, and I'm building a wall between us brick by guilty brick. "Just stressed," I manage, even though the word feels woefully inadequate. "I'm stressed, all right." Stressed that every sideways glance from Rob is him piecing it together. Stressed that Andrew's frustration at my newfound distance will lead to a reckless mistake. stressed that I'm 2 seconds away from snapping and confessing the whole ugly mess. The paranoia is its own monster. One night, I wake up convinced Rob's hovering over me, his eyes narrowed in silent accusation. When I jolt awake, there's no one there but the shadows and the pounding of my own terrified heart. The next morning, those shadows seem to linger in his eyes. Does he know? Is this some kind of twisted game before he drops the axe? At work, things aren't much better. Andrew, bless his oblivious heart, hasn't noticed Rob's growing suspicion, but I have. He sulks, his flirting now edged with a desperation that sends a shiver of fear down my spine. We need to talk, he demands, cornering me by the coffee machine. My heart lurches into my throat. About last night? About the fact I barely responded to his texts? About the fact I want this to be over? Before I can answer, Sarah, Andrew's wife, the one I tried desperately to avoid, walks by. My distraction is clear, and something flashes in Andrew's eyes. Is he jealous, or starting to suspect? Later, while grabbing a file I, accidentally, overheard whispers Andrew's name, then something about an intern and a hotel? My world tilts sideways. Is this why he was so insistent? Just another fling for him? Me? Just a notch on his bedpost? Fury surges through me, hot and blinding. Then another, even more terrifying realization hits. Everyone knows. Everyone but Rob. That night is pure torture. My gaze flits nervously to Rob's phone more times than I can count. And then it happens, a text notification. I know the sender before I even look. The world shrinks down to those few glowing lines on the screen. Something sweet, something sexy, something utterly damning. Rob's in the shower, but my shaking hands fumble to delete it before he sees. He can't see, he can never see, but when he emerges, eyes still soft with sleep, I can barely meet his gaze. The question hangs heavy in the air. Is it suspicion I see there now, or just the hurt of a husband wondering why his wife is suddenly a million miles away? Talk to me. Rob's voice is low, a dangerous rumble in the otherwise still air. I can't look at him, can't see the pain in his eyes. The way he's holding himself like a single wrong move might shatter him entirely. There's nothing to say, I croak, but it's a pathetic lie. The words are there, poisonous and vile, buzzing behind my teeth. Confess, apologize, explain, just get it over with. But even with the world crashing down, there's still a flicker of terrified defiance. You're crazy, I snap instead, projecting your own insecurities onto me. His flinch is like a whiplash across my skin. 10 years of trust, 10 years of us, and in one agonizing moment, I undo it all. The accusations fly fast and furious then. Each word slices open new wounds on both our hearts. The safe, familiar room has become a battlefield. When it's over, when the shouting fades into sobs, I collapse on our bed, our perfect bed, and feel nothing but a hollow emptiness where love was supposed to reside. Rob's on the couch, an unbridgeable ocean between us. Sleep doesn't come, just memories of his smile, his touch, the life I've carelessly thrown away. Then, that damned phone buzzes. It's Andrew, oblivious, stupid, reckless. Me hits, reply. All it takes is one glance from Rob, one glance before he lunges, snatching my phone from hands that suddenly feel coated in grime. The messages are there, damning evidence in those glowing rows of text. My stupid confession of missing him, his reply, promising another stolen night. Rob doesn't even need to say it. His face, God, his face. It shatters. It's not anger at first, but a gut-wrenching, bone-deep hurt. Like all the oxygen has been sucked from the room, leaving him gasping. And I'm the one who turned off the air. How could you? It's barely a whisper, broken glass on the floor. The apologies spill forth, mangled and useless. Then the blame. It's ugly, the things we say, ripping into what's left of our life until it's not just a mess, but an unrecognizable pile of ash. I say things I can never take back, and worse, I know they're true. It ends with a door slamming, the vibration running up my spine. I sink to the floor and finally let the tears fall, wishing not for forgiveness, but oblivion. Each clang of a fork against a plate sounds like a death knell for our marriage. Breakfast is the worst. The morning light cruelly highlighting the empty space beside me at the table. Rob doesn't look up from his cereal. Even the silence is accusatory. He's banished to the guest room now. That door with its new, heavy lock might as well be a tombstone on 10 years. Last night, I heard him crying on the other side. Quiet sobs that made me want to curl up and die, but pride held me back. I deserve this misery. Maybe if I suffer enough, the guilt might wash away. Spoiler alert. It doesn't. I break things off with Andrew over the phone. It's cowardly, I know, but seeing him again, feeling the pull, would have shattered what little resolve I have left. His anger surprises me, then he flips, acting like this was nothing, like I was just a fling. The realization stings more than any insult would have. I was a fool, just another notch on his bedpost. The news travels fast. Rob's sister calls. She's his champion, always has been, but even her voice has an edge to it now. Disappointment tinged with pity. She says the right things, but I know she's silently judging. Everyone is. Work is worse. My little escape route is now a war zone of covert glances and whispered speculation. I swear, the elevator dings sound accusing. They know, they all do. This isn't just gossip anymore, it's my legacy. The woman who ruined her perfect life for some cheap, meaningless thrill. I pack a bag with trembling hands. Each folded shirt, each neatly arranged pair of shoes, is an exercise in agony. Our wedding photos stare mockingly from the dresser. Rob's in the living room. I don't tell him I'm leaving, just put the suitcase by the door. Going somewhere? His voice is sandpaper, devoid of feeling. It's somehow worse than anger would have been. I nod, unable to find my voice. I want to kneel, beg for forgiveness, or even understanding. But the words won't come, and even if they did, they would mean nothing now. I walk towards the door, and for the first time, this place doesn't feel like home. The door closes with a soft click, not a bang. It's the most anticlimactic ending to the most destructive thing I've ever done. I stand there for a moment, unsure where to go, what to do. All I know is that turning the knob was easy compared to what comes next. The new city isn't a fresh start, it's exile. This cramped apartment, its sterile walls and unfamiliar creaks, just amplifies the silence echoing in my heart. I am what those rom-coms warned against, the woman with a suitcase full of regrets and nowhere to unpack them. Nights are the worst. Sleep is a fickle beast. When it finally does come, it's riddled with nightmares. His eyes, once filled with warmth, now burning with hatred. I wake with ragged gasps, the sheets coiled around me like a shroud. Even morning brings no escape, only the dull ache of guilt that's become as familiar as my own heartbeat. News travels even to this isolated corner of my new life. Rob's sister, an unlikely lifeline in this disaster, sends a clipped text. He's seeing someone new, Sarah, of all people. They met at a charity event, she says. It should hurt more than it does. It should feel like a fresh betrayal, but deep down, there's a flicker of, what? Relief? Is it even possible to be happy for him, knowing I destroyed any chance of my own happiness? I try to fill the void. Dates, mostly. Tinder swipes. Awkward coffee meetups. Each time, there's that moment. The pause when they ask about my past, when honesty feels like the only way forward. And each time, their eyes change. Pity, judgment, or worse, a flicker of predatory interest. I'm damaged goods now. My escape is work, mindless spreadsheets, until one day, it isn't. I stumble across an article. It's one of those clickbait self-help trash pieces, but something in the title stings. Infidelity. The lies we tell ourselves. It's harsh, brutal, eviscerating every pathetic excuse I've been clinging to. That night, everything shatters again. Not with a bang of anger, but the quiet sobs of a soul finally acknowledging the devastation. It's the turning point, not the grand kind from movies, but a desperate, painful one. Therapy starts the next week. It's awkward and humiliating, laying bare the ugliest parts of myself for a stranger who charges by the hour. I talk about Rob, the good times, the way he laughed at my silly jokes. The therapist doesn't offer easy comfort. She asks why ruin all that? I still don't have the answer. Time becomes a blur of introspection, punctuated by tears that sometimes feel pointless and other times, like they might actually be washing something away. I don't emerge whole, because maybe I never really was, but there's a strength forging amidst the shattered pieces. One day, I look in the mirror and the haunted woman staring back doesn't frighten me as much. The betrayal will always be there, a scar on my soul, but maybe, just maybe, it doesn't have. My girlfriend and I have been together for almost 4 years. When I met her, I visited a local comedy club every week to try and participate in their open mic night. I had always enjoyed stand-up comedy, and being a comedian was a dream of mine. That didn't exactly pan out for me, but I met a lot of great friends and my girlfriend. She was an employee at the club. She was in college at the time, and she wanted to be a talent agent, so she thought she could make some good connections there. When she graduated, she landed a pretty good job at a local talent agency. She was working as a scalp to bring in new talent. I ended up giving up on my comedy career when I got a big promotion at my day job. I didn't have the time to go to open mic nights or work on my jokes, so it fell to the back burner. I still do love comedy, and I visit my friends at the club, but that's about it. My girlfriend and I continued seeing each other for a couple of years before she got a big break at the agency. We were living together at the time, and everything was going smoothly. She was somebody that I saw a future with, and I was ready to buy a ring and propose. However, whenever we would talk about marriage and starting a family, she would tell me that she didn't want any of that until she was at least 30. My girlfriend was working as a tour manager for a new comedian that the agency was representing. I won't say who it was, but they were on America's Got Talent, and they garnered a lot of attention very quickly. The comedian didn't get very far in the competition, but they gained a significant fan base from the time they were there. We had a long conversation before she accepted the job, just so she could make sure I was okay with it. The position would have her on the road frequently, and she was worried it would impact our relationship. I didn't want to hold her back in any way, so I told her to go for it. It was what she wanted to do, and I trusted her, so there was no reason for me to not want her to go. I met the comedian a few times. He and my wife had grown close from the time they spent together. When they first began working together, he was a newlywed. Over the years, he and his wife tried to have a baby. My girlfriend had been working with him for about 2 years when everything hit the fan. I had never suspected that they had anything more than a professional relationship with each other. The comedian landed a 3-month-long tour across the country. All of the shows were in pretty quick succession of each other, so when they were performing, they were on the road. I said goodbye to my girlfriend, not expecting to see her again until it was all over. A couple of weeks into the tour, I was curious, so I checked the schedule and saw that they were going to be in a nearby city, so I could surprise my girlfriend by attending a show. I saw that there was one about an hour away, so I bought tickets and booked a hotel room for us. When the weekend of the show came, I made my way to the club. I was standing outside in the line, waiting for my turn to get in. At one point, I was standing next to a narrow alleyway, with a few people hanging out in it. They were all laughing and smoking, so I kind of assumed that they were employees of the club. I looked down the alleyway, and I noticed my girlfriend right away. I tried to look away and not make myself obvious, because I was there to surprise her, but then I heard her giggling, and it got my attention. It sounded a little flirtatious. I looked back. I saw the comedian she was managing pinning her to the wall and kissing her while her arms were wrapped around him. It was a very comfortable kiss. It definitely wasn't the first time it happened. When they finally pulled away, he made a joke about how that was his good luck charm. Somebody opened the door and called them in before I could see anything else. I didn't know what to do. I continued walking in the line, almost like a zombie. I was in shock and completely stuck in my head. I needed to know if they had ever done anything more than kissing. The kiss was already not okay, but I needed to know if there was something more going on, especially considering that the comedian had a new baby at home. While I was in the line, my girlfriend spotted me. She rushed over to me and asked me what I was doing there. I told her that I was there to surprise her, and she brought me back to the green room. I had to smile and laugh with both of them while knowing that there could potentially be something going on with them. His set time finally came, and my girlfriend went out after him to record his performance. She told me to stay behind in the green room because she was going to come and check in on me during the show. I didn't feel like watching his performance, so it was okay with me. I noticed that she left her purse behind when she left. I was alone in the green room, so I took the liberty of going through it. Inside her bag, I found an entire box of condoms. When I opened it, I saw there were only a couple left. She and I had been together for years, and I knew she was on the pill, so we didn't use condoms. I knew they had to be for someone else. That pretty much solidified it for me. She was obviously sleeping with someone, and from what I saw, it wasn't too far a leap to confirm that it was the comedian. I stormed out of the green room, which happened to be right behind the stage, so everybody in the audience saw the door slam open before I rushed out of it. My girlfriend caught up to me and asked me what was wrong. I replied telling her that I knew she was sleeping with the comedian, gesturing to him on stage. Of course, people started pulling out their phones and recording our little altercation. The comedian was trying to rein everybody back in to pay attention to him while we were fighting, but it wasn't working. I yelled at him while he was on stage too, but he didn't say anything. My girlfriend tried to tell me that I was wrong, but I told her that I saw her kissing him in the alley and I found the condoms in her purse. She didn't have anything to say about that. I went home as soon as I could after the arguments and tried to figure out what I wanted to do moving forward. Obviously, I wasn't going to be with her any longer. Our argument was no doubt humiliating for her at the time, but I wanted to do even more. I ended up calling the agency that she worked for and telling them that she was sleeping with one of their clients. I didn't know their employee conduct rules, but I imagine it was probably frowned upon. They told me that they would handle it from there. Some people shared the videos of the altercation online, and that seemed to have gotten back to the comedian's wife. From everything I could tell, they ended up getting a divorce. I can only hope it was because he was cheating on her and she found out. My girlfriend was let go from her job at the agency, and a lot of the clients she was managing were given to other agents. I knew she was disappointed with that, but that was just karma getting back at her in the end. I keep finding myself looking back at our relationship and trying to pinpoint if there were any signs before I caught her, but I don't think there were. To this day, I still don't know how long their affair lasted, but it must have been a while. OP, you trusted your girlfriend to go on this tour with the comedian and she broke that trust by sleeping with him. Of course, it was her job, so stopping her wasn't an option, but from it seems she would have turned it down if you had issues with it. It's good that the comedian and his wife got divorced as well. You didn't mention much about him, but it almost seems like fame went to his head a little bit, and he took advantage of the time with your girlfriend. It is a shame that there was a baby in the picture with them. I know your girlfriend probably regrets what she did because it cost her everything, including her job. I agree, her losing her job and all of her clients is karma's way of telling her that what she did was wrong. Anyways, let's now get into our next story for today. Here is my story. My wife and I both met each other 15 years ago at summer camp. I had been attending the camp since I was a child, and when I was of age, I applied to be a counselor. My girlfriend had actually just moved to the area and applied for a summer job there. She was a new girl to everybody else who had been going there for years. She was beautiful, and right away I had a crush on her. We had our little summer flame, and we didn't think anything else would come of it. However, we kept in touch, and we eventually ended up going to college in the same city. From there, our relationship turned romantic. When we graduated, we got married shortly after, and everything had been perfect between us. I truly loved her with all my heart, and I thought she felt the same way. We had 2 children together, and I had a great job, so she was able to stay home and take care of them full time. It was like the perfect American dream. I didn't have to travel often for my work, but every year there was a big company retreat in the mountains. It was for team building activities in theory, but it was just an excuse for everybody to get together and drink for an entire weekend. I looked forward to it all year long. I worked in the same office as my best friend, let's call him Mark. We met each other during our senior year of college, and we hit it off right away. I had never gotten along with another person quite the way I got along with Mark. We got each other's sense of humor, and we could talk about the strangest things for hours. He was hired at the firm we worked at first, then he saw a potential opening for me, and he vouched for me. I thought I had him to thank for how great my life was in some respects. One of the reasons I was looking forward to going on the company trip was to spend some more quality time with Mark. The week of the trip came along and everybody in the office was excited, including Mark. However, the Friday before we were set to leave, Mark didn't show up to work. I texted him and asked him what was wrong, and he told me that he must have had a very bad stomach bug. I asked him if he was going to be better by the time we left for the trip, and he said he wouldn't. I was bummed that Mark wasn't going to be able to go, but I didn't think it would stop me from having a good time while I was there. There are plenty of other people in the office that I got on with. Saturday morning came and I said goodbye to my wife and left for the trip. I had a wonderful time while I was there, and I never suspected that anything would have happened while I was gone. After all, my wife was home with our kids. I texted Mark a couple of times during the weekend just to make sure he was all right. He told me that he was still in bed trying to recover, but he appreciated me checking in. I sent him a few funny pictures and videos of things that were happening while we were there. I got home from the trip Sunday night and was relaxing with my kids and telling them an abridged version of what happened over the weekend. My wife was always somewhat of a busybody. Relaxing was difficult for her in general, and she would often be going around the house and picking up toys and blankets and things like that to keep it tidy. The house was spotless when I came in, but she was still walking around and cleaning pointless things. In hindsight, I think she just didn't want to talk to me because she felt guilty. It was getting late, so I scooped up my kids and brought them to their rooms to tuck them in and say goodnight since I missed them the past couple of days. While I was kissing my son on the forehead, he asked me if Uncle Mark was going to be coming over again. First, I thought he was asking because he hadn't seen him in a while and missed him. I told him that I didn't know when Mark would be coming over again. Then he told me that the day before Mark promised him he would be seeing him soon. I clarified with him and asked him if he had seen Mark the day before, and he confirmed it. I had no idea why Mark was at my house. When I was texting him, he told me that he was at home and recovering from the stomach bug. If he was at my house, that would mean that he lied to me. My suspicions were immediately raised because he wouldn't have lied to me about going to my house unless he was doing something he shouldn't have done. We were good friends and I trusted both him and my wife. If he needed to stop by my house for something, I would have understood. When I got to my bedroom, I mentioned to my wife what our son had said. She shrugged it off, saying that he must have been mistaken, and he might have been talking about a couple of weeks ago when Mark was over. My son was 4 years old at the time, so I doubted he would mention it if it was so long ago. I believed my son more than I believed my wife at the moment. However, I didn't have anything to prove my suspicions, so I dropped it. I went back to the office the following Tuesday morning and Mark was there looking just as good as you ever did. I was still suspicious, so I checked in with him to see how his weekend went. He confirmed to me once again that he was home resting all weekend long. My gut was telling me that there was something seriously wrong, and I needed to get to the bottom of it. A few nights later, my wife left her phone in the living room while she went to do the dishes, so I snuck off to the bathroom with it. I hated going through her things, but I felt like I was being lied to, and I needed to know what the truth was. I looked through the text message conversation between her and Mark to see if there was anything suspicious. There were a lot of deleted messages between them. My mind wandered to everything that could have been in those messages. I did not doubt at that point that it was evidence of an affair. I was able to type in a passcode to look at her hidden album, and I found a lot of pictures of her naked. I found a few other pictures of a man whose face wasn't in the image, but I recognized a couple of tattoos as ones that Mark had. I was right to be suspicious after what our son had said. She did have Mark over, and they must have slept together while I was away for the weekend. I could only imagine that Mark faked being sick because he knew that there would be a window where he could be with my wife without having to worry about me. What angered me the most about all of this was the fact that they did it while my children were home. My son remembered seeing Mark there over the weekend. I didn't know the exact details about it, but I was furious. I put my wife's phone back before she noticed anything, and I went to bed early. I needed to think about what I wanted to do moving forward. I was going to divorce my wife, and I wanted nothing to do with Mark in the future. Whether that meant somehow getting him fired or finding a new job myself, I didn't know. All I knew was that I wanted to get back at both of them. I knew that Mark liked to flirt at the office, so I thought I might be able to do something with that. In particular, there was an assistant that he would often flirt with. The following day in the break room around lunch, he was flirting with her, once again touching her on the shoulder and laughing with her. It wasn't anything harmful, but under the right circumstances, it could be seen in a different light. I subtly took a couple of pictures of them while they were close together for later. When Mark left to go to a meeting, I talked to the assistant and I asked her if she felt uncomfortable around Mark sometimes. She looked at me kind of confused. It was obvious from some of their conversations that she was into him as well. She told me that she wasn't uncomfortable. I planted a seed in her head that how much she flirted with her and touched her could be considered sexual harassment. She nodded her head like she was thinking about it for the first time. That same day, I went to our HR department and filed a formal complaint that I thought Mark's behavior was inappropriate. It was anonymous, so he would never know that it was me. The following day, everything was going normally, and he was pulled into the HR department for a meeting. Whenever things like that happen, people will either assume you're getting reprimanded for something or you're getting a raise. The very next day, we had a sexual harassment seminar in the workplace. Mark was publicly brought into the HR office just the day before, so everybody started putting the pieces together and thinking that Mark was responsible for the seminar. With all the conversations and rumors, the assistant he was hitting on started telling people that he made her uncomfortable, and the narrative of Mark sexually harassing people at work took full form. Word got back to him, and eventually he came to me and asked me about it. He trusted that I would be honest with him about what people were saying. I told him that I didn't know what to believe. After all, he was sleeping with my wife, so he clearly couldn't be trusted. He was shocked that I said that, probably surprised to learn that I even knew about it. The talk didn't stop in the office, and Mark eventually put in his 2 weeks' notice because he felt so uncomfortable. Meanwhile, I found an amazing divorce attorney, and I served my wife with papers a few days before Mark quit his job. She was completely shocked by the news when she got it. She had no idea I knew about her and Mark being together. She tried to make me out as a villain for leaving her and the kids. I told her I had no intention of leaving the kids, just her. We got our divorce, and because she cheated, she wasn't awarded any spousal support. She was forced to go live with her mother and look for another job. I got full custody of the kids. The judge did not like that she was having an affair with the kids in the house so blatantly. She still has visitation rights to them, though. It hurts the most when I think about how it wasn't just one person that I lost in all of this. I thought of Mark like a brother, and he and my wife both stabbed me in the back. I have a lot of stuff to work on for myself before I even consider dating in the future. OP, I think Mark definitely faked being sick so he could spend the weekend with your wife when he knew you wouldn't be there. Even though their messages were deleted, I would imagine they had planned that in advance. I don't know how long they have been sleeping together, but for them to coordinate like that, it must have been a while. It is very maddening that your wife would have him over to your house with your children present, even if they were acting friendly and not doing anything in front of them. The fact that your children were present and interacting with Mark enough to remember he was there is sad. You would think that even seeing your children would give your supposed best friend second thoughts, but it didn't. I'm glad you were able to leave her, and I know it's going to take some time before you're ready to date anybody else in the future. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. The moment you find a hotel receipt in your fiancé's purse for a weekend she was supposedly visiting her sister, your world starts to tilt. That's how it began for me. Maria and I were packing the car for what was supposed to be the ultimate road trip before we tied the knot. A last adventure is two, before becoming one. The receipt fell out, fluttering to the floor, and I couldn't help but notice the date. It didn't add up. Hey, what's this? I held it up, trying to keep my tone light, but my heart was already racing. Maria glanced over, her smile faltering just a fraction before she recovered. Oh, that must be a booking mistake. You know how it is with those online reservations. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. So, I let it go. Or at least, I pretended to. The trip started off as everything we'd hoped for. Endless roads stretched out before us, each day promising new adventures. But then, one night, as Maria thought I was asleep, I overheard her whispering affectionately into her phone, a stark contrast to the conversations we'd been having. My stomach twisted into knots. It was the first real hint that the receipt was no mistake. I tried to shove the doubts to the back of my mind, focus on the landscapes rolling past us, the playlist we sang along to, the greasy diner breakfasts. But the unease wouldn't leave me. It all came crashing down when a mutual friend let slip something about Maria and someone else. I thought Jake knew, they said, their face turning pale as they realized the mistake. That night, I waited until Maria was sound asleep, her phone abandoned on the nightstand. I knew it was a violation of her privacy, but the suspicion was eating me alive. And there it was, all the evidence I needed in texts and photos. My heart didn't just break, it shattered. Confronting her was the hardest thing I've ever done. The motel room felt too small, the air too thick as I laid out the proof before her. Maria broke down, admitting to everything. The affair had been going on for months. The road trip, our premarital celebration, felt like a farce. I can't do this, I said, the words tasting like bile. We're going home. The drive back was torture. We barely spoke. Maria tried to apologize, to explain, but the betrayal was too deep. Once we got back, I moved out immediately. The wedding was off, and so was whatever future we thought we had. That road trip was meant to be the beginning of our forever. Instead, it was the end. The end of us, of trust, of the life I thought I knew. And as I drove away from our shared apartment for the last time, I couldn't help but feel that the real journey was only just beginning. A journey to find myself again, without Maria. The morning after calling off our wedding, the air between Maria and me was thick with unsaid words and regrets. She tried to fill it with pleas for forgiveness, her voice trembling with promises that it was all a mistake, that she could change. But some mistakes are too big, too deep. I couldn't just unsee the betrayal, couldn't unfeel the heartbreak. So, I stayed firm, my decision unwavering even as her voice broke. At breakfast, in a quiet diner off the highway, Maria slid her engagement ring across the table. It clinked against the formica, a sound far too final for my liking. Without picking it up, I left it there. A tip for the waitress maybe, or a cursed token for whoever found it next. I didn't look back to see what became of it, the symbolic end of our future together. Back in town, moving out of our shared apartment felt like tearing off a limb. Each object I packed was a memory, a moment in time when things were good, when our biggest worry was what to make for dinner, not shattered trust. The silence of my new, smaller apartment was a stark contrast to the life I had envisioned with Maria. But Maria wasn't ready to let go. My phone became a constant reminder of what I was trying to escape, buzzing with her attempts to reach out. Texts, emails, voicemails, each one a plea for another chance. It was relentless, a torture in its own right. Blocking her was my only reprieve, a digital barrier to guard my slowly healing heart. Life had to move on, and so did I. I threw myself into a new job, a fresh start where no one knew my past or the scars I carried. It was liberating in a way, focusing on mundane tasks, learning new names, being part of something that wasn't tainted by betrayal. But Maria wasn't done. One day, my phone exploded with notifications from friends about a public apology she'd posted online. A long, heart-wrenching confession of her mistakes and how much she still loved me. It was dramatic, designed to pull at the heartstrings of anyone who read it. Anyone but me. I had no heartstrings left for her to pull. So, I did the only thing I could. I blocked her, erasing her from my digital world as I had tried to erase her from my heart. The universe, however, seemed to have other plans. One evening at the gym, amidst the clang of weights and the drone of treadmills, I spotted her. Maria. She looked smaller somehow, or maybe I had just built her up to be this giant in my mind. Our eyes met, and for a second, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with. Then reality crashed back, and I remembered the woman she had become. She started towards me, lips parting to speak, but I couldn't hear her. I didn't want to. Turning on my heel, I walked away, the sound of my heartbeat drowning out everything else. That encounter at the gym was a stark reminder that moving on wasn't just about physical distance or blocking numbers. It was about healing, about finding a way to live with the scars. And as I walked away from her, from us, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was starting to do just that. The day started like any other at my new job. I was finally getting the hang of things, feeling a semblance of normalcy returning to my life. That is until Maria showed up, unannounced and unwelcome, her appearance slicing through the calm like a knife. She made a scene, loud and emotional, right in the middle of the office floor. My coworkers stared, a mix of curiosity and discomfort in their eyes as I tried to usher her out, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Maria, you can't be here. Please, just leave, I begged, my voice low, desperate to avoid further spectacle. But she was relentless, her pleas for me to listen, to give her another chance, echoing off the walls. It took every ounce of self-control not to respond, to just walk away. Finally, she left, but the damage was done. The whispers started almost immediately, a mix of pity and intrigue that followed me for days. I considered legal action, even consulting a lawyer about getting a restraining order. But something held me back. Maybe it was the hope that Maria would find her way without me, or perhaps it was the remnants of what we once had. Either way, I decided against it, a decision I'd come to question in the days that followed. Maria's desperation knew no bounds. She reached out to my friends and family, trying to rally a force to plead her case. It was manipulative, a play on the relationships I valued most. And then came the ultimate betrayal. I found out that one of my closest friends, someone I trusted implicitly, had been seeing Maria. The news felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me reeling. I confronted him, the anger and sense of betrayal boiling over. How could you? I demanded, the friendship disintegrating before my eyes. He had no real answers, just mumbled apologies and excuses that fell on deaf ears. That was the end of it. Another casualty in the wake of Maria's chaos. As if to twist the knife further, Maria and my now ex-friend flaunted their relationship publicly, a spectacle designed to provoke a reaction from me. But I refused to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I channeled my energy into positive outlets, joining a local sports team and volunteering. It was a way to rebuild, to focus on something other than the mess my life had become. Then, the letter arrived. Handwritten, its pages filled with Maria's confessions of love and regret. She spoke of mistakes and a desire to make things right, to return to what we once had. But as I held the letter, I felt nothing. The words that once would have meant everything to me now felt hollow, empty. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on moving forward, on the new paths I was carving out for myself. Maria's letter found its way into the trash, a symbolic gesture of letting go. It was time to close that chapter, to embrace the future, however uncertain it might be. The moment I saw Maria's handwriting on the envelope, my heart sank. There was a time when a letter from her would have made my day. Now, it just felt like another attempt to claw her way back into my life. Without giving it a second thought, I tore it up, pieces of her apology fluttering into the trash like the final leaves of autumn. It was over, and I was determined to leave it that way. Life, however, had a way of testing that resolve. At a mutual friend's party, our paths crossed again. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Maria tried to approach me, her eyes searching for some sign of the love we once shared. I couldn't bear it. Before she could utter a single word, I made my exit, the sound of my own heartbeat loud in my ears as I left. But then, the tranquility of my newfound solitude was shattered by a series of anonymous threats. Texts, calls, letters left on my doorstep, each one more menacing than the last. It didn't take a detective to figure out who might be behind them, or at least who might have incited them. Enough was enough. I installed security cameras around my house, a digital watchful eye to catch whoever was trying to intimidate me. And it didn't take long. The footage was clear as day. Maria, under the cover of night, vandalizing my car. The sight of her, once so beloved, now a figure of spite, felt surreal. With the evidence in hand, I went to police. Filing the report felt like crossing a Rubicon. There was no going back after this. Maria was arrested, and the wheels of justice began to turn, slowly but inexorably. The trial was a blur. Sitting in the courtroom, recounting the events that led up to her arrest, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. The person I once loved was now a stranger, sitting on the defendant's bench, facing charges because of what she'd done to me. When the verdict came, and Maria was found guilty, receiving a restraining order and a short jail sentence, part of me wanted to feel vindicated, triumphant even. But all I felt was a profound sense of loss. As I walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the entire ordeal pressing down on me, I realized that this was not just the end of Maria's trial. It was the closing of a chapter in my life, one that had brought me both the greatest joy and the deepest pain. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it, whatever it might bring. The day Maria was released from jail, a ripple of unease went through me. I heard through the grapevine she might be leaving town for good, and part of me couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and apprehension. It felt like maybe, just maybe, I could finally close this painful chapter of my life and move forward. And moving forward is exactly what I started to do. I met Liz, a woman whose kindness and understanding seemed to know no bounds. With her, I found a sense of peace and happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. She knew about my past, about Maria, and she accepted me, scars and all. But just as I was beginning to feel like I could breathe again, Maria reached out. She said she was leaving town and asked to meet one last time, to apologize in person. Against every instinct telling me to ignore her, I agreed. Maybe I needed the closure, or maybe I just needed to see for myself that I was truly over her. We met in a public park, a neutral ground bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Maria looked different somehow, softer, regretful. She apologized, her words sincere, or at least they seemed to be. She talked about change, about understanding the pain she caused, and wishing nothing but the best for me. Listening to her, I realized I had already found my closure, not in her words, but in the life I had started to build without her. I accepted her apology, not for her sake, but for mine. It was time to let go of the anger, the betrayal, and the hurt. I hope you find what you're looking for, Maria, I told her, but it won't be with me. As she walked away, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. It was finally over. Maria was leaving, and I could put all of this behind me. With Liz by my side and a future filled with possibilities ahead, I felt ready to leave the past in the past. That day in the park wasn't just about saying goodbye to Maria. It was about saying goodbye to the person I was when I was with her. I was ready to move on, to embrace the happiness I had found with Liz, and to face whatever challenges and joys the future might bring. Maria's departure marked the end of a tumultuous chapter in my life, but it also marked the beginning of something new, something better. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly looking forward to what was next. Just when I thought the dust had settled, the shadows in my life grew longer, more menacing. Liz and I, we were finding our rhythm, a new beat to dance to after the storm. But that's when I noticed it, the feeling of eyes on us, a presence lingering just beyond the edge of vision on our dates. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia, the leftover scars from my past with Maria. But when you feel watched, it's hard to shake the feeling. The realization hit me one chilly evening. The face in the crowd wasn't just any face. It was him, Maria's new partner, the one she moved on to when our world together crumbled. Seeing him there, it wasn't just a coincidence. He was there for me, a dark reminder of a chapter one thought I had closed. Confrontation was inevitable. One night, as Liz and I left a restaurant, the shadow stepped into the light, and all my fears were confirmed. It was him, and the air crackled with tension. Words were exchanged, heated, angry, and then it escalated. Blows were thrown, a dance as old as time, fueled by pain and revenge. It ended with him on the ground and me, standing over him, breathing hard, heart pounding. The police arrived, sirens cutting through the night. He was arrested, but not before his threats echoed in my ears, a promise of more to come. It was a wake-up call. My world, Liz's world, it wasn't safe. Not yet. So, I fortified our lives, installing cameras, locks, anything to keep the darkness at bay. But with each new security measure, I saw the light in Liz's eyes dim a little more. The danger Maria brought into my life was like a poison, seeping into every crack, every crevice of happiness I tried to build. Liz and I, we started to crumble under the weight of constant vigilance. The stress, the fear, it became our constant companion, and eventually, it was too much for Liz. She left, the love we shared not enough to weather the storm Maria's shadow cast over us. And there I was, alone again, my life a fortress against threats real and imagined. The joy I found with Liz, now just another casualty in the wake of my past with Maria. It was my downfall, a solitary existence defined by the aftermath of a love gone wrong. The final nail in the coffin came one quiet night, a message that chilled me to the bone. "This isn't over," it read, a simple declaration of war from Maria's partner. It was a promise of more darkness to come, a storm on the horizon with no shelter in sight. As I stared at the screen, the reality of my situation settled in. I was alone, truly alone, in a battle I never wanted. The final confrontation loomed large, an ominous end to a saga marked by betrayal and revenge. My downfall was complete, a life once filled with love now overshadowed by fear and loss. The story of Jake and Maria, a cautionary tale with no redemption, no victors, just the remnants of a